Questions and comments? The honourable member for North Okanagan-Shuswap.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Courtenay-Alberni for his intervention. He knows how important tourism is, as I do here in the North Okanagan-Shuswap, and I want to talk about how long it's been since this government has really failed our tourism sector. We're going now almost a year since we started calling for vaccines, rapid testing, and so on, so we could keep our tourism sector open. I see it as a failure of the current government to address this, and now we're entering with a third wave, with a second wave, with a threat of a third wave. Does the member agree that the vaccines and the rapid testing are so important to our tourism sector so we can get back on our feet? Thank you.
Absolutely, and I want to thank my colleague. For the good question, and I know that he is, tourism is such an important part of his economic makeup where he is in the Shuswap and in the Okanagan, and for his constant advocacy for wild Pacific salmon. Madam Speaker, he nailed it. Like when it comes to tourism businesses, we need tax credits first to help them get through those costs associated with testing. That's absolutely critical, and the government to provide financial support for rapid testing. That has to happen, and we need to get the vaccine into Canada. We see how far behind we're falling other nations, and it's absolutely critical we get that in place, and I want to thank him for the question.
Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Trois-Rivières.
The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. The honourable member, could you please descend your microphone? I apologize. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from Courtenay-Alberni for that speech. He spoke about salmon. And in Quebec, we have an event every spring. It's the Sugar Bush. This is an event that's extremely important in agritourism in Quebec. More than half of the association representing the different sugar bushes have had to shut down. So we feel like the industry has been forgotten. Do you think that these people could be counted in? They're often forgotten, but they represent a significant industry for the country. Thank you.
Member for Courtenay-Alberni.
Well, that's an excellent question, Madam Speaker, and I really appreciate her intervention. I mean, this is the type of niche business, or the festivals and events, for example, that are being left out, where the wage subsidy is not going to get them through it. The CEBA loan certainly isn't enough. The rent program doesn't help them, and borrowing a bunch more money isn't going to cut it. They're not going to be able to do that. They can't absorb it. They need liquidity to ensure that those festivals and cultural events are in place next year. Hopefully we're back to normal next year, Madam Speaker. But the government needs to start looking at things and having more flexibility. Right now, the programs are so rigid and they're leaving so many people out. And this is an excellent opportunity. And I want to thank her for that question. And let's hope the government makes the right choice and creates more flexibility and does better outreach to sectors like the sugar bush and those folks that are in that sector.
And comments, the honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank my colleague, the member for Courtenay-Alberni, for his tireless advocacy. In his speech, he so articulately laid out the incredible impact of this pandemic on tourism operators. When I think of Northwest BC, I think of the steelhead guiding lodges in the Bulkley Valley. I think about Haida Gwaii and the tour operators there, the cabin rentals, and other small businesses that have been so dramatically hit by this crisis. Now, my question for my honorable colleague is whether the current programs that have been created by the government can be adjusted to meet the needs of these small tourism operators, or whether indeed we need a new set of programs that are specifically tailored to the needs of that unique sector.
That's a fabulous question.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
Madam Speaker. Yeah, thanks. I think about, Madam Speaker, the HASCAP program, for example. It's not designed like the CEBA loan. So the CEBA loan, obviously, you get the $40,000, the $60,000 loan. You only have to repay $40,000 if you pay back the rest. So you get $20,000 towards your losses that you've incurred. We need that in the HASCAP program and the bigger programs. Otherwise, these lodges, these businesses, they're just not going to be able to survive. They can't take on more and more debt. It's just not achievable. Also, a lot of these programs, the wage subsidy isn't going to help you if you've got a lodge and you're empty. The rent program's not going to help you if your lodge is out floating on the water. These are things that there's huge gaps, and he's absolutely right that we have to develop a better framework and look at those sectors that are the hardest hit. And that is the tourism and hospitality sector. And we're all feeling it as members of parliament. I've seen each and every one of us who care so much about the restaurants and the businesses in their riding, bringing forward these asks and requests of government to be more flexible. We're just not seeing that. And it's highly disappointing. It's a critical sector.
And comments, the honourable member for Calgary, Signal Hill.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank the member for, I'm not sure how he got all this in 20 minutes, but he covered a lot of ground. And very much so around the programs and who's been missed out on the programs. But I want to ask the member if he would not concur with the fact that at the end of the day, what the tourism industry and a lot of these small businesses, they're not wanting government handouts. They're wanting to get back to business and doing what they do. And if we would have had a better program in place for vaccines and that sort of thing, where there's a possibility the border could have been opened this summer, both Alberta and British Columbia rely heavily on U.S. tourism. I'd just like to ask the member to comment a bit about that.
The honourable member for Courtenay-Alberni.
I think it's a good question, and my colleague and many of colleagues from across political parties were part of working with the United States. Many of us are part of the Canada-U.S. Parliamentary Association, and we're part. Him and I would be a part of the group in the Pacific Northwest, PENWAR. We don't have a lot of integration, and we need more integration. So whether it be ensuring, obviously vaccines here in Canada would make a difference, but we also need to be regionally working together more collectively. And we're not doing that. And but right now, the number one priority has got to be getting vaccines to the provinces, getting them out the door so we can return to normal as fast as we can, and then work collectively as a region and with our biggest trading partner and our biggest partner when it comes to tourism, that's the United States, so we can open up that border and get people moving and back to our tourism destinations.
Comments, the honourable member for London Fanshawe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm so grateful that our critic for small business and tourism was able to get that speech in, because he did cover a great deal. What I've heard a lot as the critic for status of women, and of course from my local community, is that the government has left behind obviously those within that aviation section, that tourism section, but the women that especially are doing the bookings for travel, they've taken a huge hit, and what the government has done to help them or not help them, if you could cover that, but also in terms of that aviation sector, and within the airports, London Airport has seen quite a lot of flights being cut, and what's not being done, what should be done to help those workers as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member of Courtenay-Alberni.
Well, that's a great question. I want to thank my colleague, because she has been talking a lot about this issue, especially women that are being impacted. So we talked about the importance of childcare and the importance of that as part of a recovery. We talked about those travel agents, and I'm really glad she brought up travel agents, because the government keeps talking about helping out with a transportation recovery plan. But one thing that we do know is the big ones who are going to be hit are the travel agents. Right now, they're having to repay the airlines and these big corporations tons of money that they just don't have, because they've taken bookings, and a lot of that occupation of the travel agent sector is predominantly female. The numbers are clear, and that's just that's evident. And they've been asking for that to be part of a transportation recovery plan, and it needs to happen, Madam Speaker, sooner than later. The whole transportation sector is just hanging on by a thread, and it's absolutely essential that we don't leave anyone out, especially travel agents, especially the aviation sector. We need a national aviation strategy like other countries have done. And we need to protect that infrastructure for women, especially those that are using the buses, for example, more than men. We can't, after the Highway of Tears, we've seen what happens when we lose, that transportation.
Resuming debate.